Welcome to episode 4 of Journal World's Beyond All Borders podcast. Now, today's episode is all about the EHCP, Education Healthcare Plan. Now, if you're here, 100% I'm sure you know what the EHCP is. I'm going to tell you a bit about my journey, our journey, how we secured our EHCP, how we secured our SEN placement, and some of the tips and tricks and trials and tribulations in between that journey as well. So just in case you don't know what it is, the Education Healthcare Plan is a legally binding document that basically explains the support that your child can get. It names a special school or a mainstream school, and it's a document that says what is your child entitled to based on their special and educational needs. Once this document is complete and finalised, the local authority and the school that your child is in have to follow this document. So it's very important for people or parents like us who have SEN children who need this kind of support. So there's kind of 3 stages that I think of. There's the application, there's the EHC needs assessment stage, and then there's the part where you may or may not get issued a final EHCP or draft EHCP before the final. So who actually applies for the EHCP? Now, a lot of people probably think that the school or the placement that your child's already in applies for it. I personally don't agree with that. I was the one who applied for my own child's EHCP, and even though some people say to me, but the school does it for you, the nursery does it for you, I'm not willing to let my child's important legally binding document be done by a paid person who works in a nursery or works in a school. This is my child. This is something that he needs and something I needed. So I was the only person who was going to do this document, and there was no other way about it. So nobody knows or cares about my child as much as I do. So I was going to be the only person who was going to complete this document. Even though I work full time and I knew that this was going to take up a lot of months, a lot of time around my full-time job, it had to be done. So let me kind of start you from the beginning. So Forrest was around 2.5 years old when I started the EHCP process. Now, at that time, if you've watched my previous video, that's the time when we had just got his autism diagnosis through Right to Choose. And in my head, I had this structure of what I was going to do, which was get his diagnosis, get his EHCP secured, and then get his specialist placement secured as well after that. So that was the kind of structure that I was working towards. Now, the reason I did it so early was because my child at the time, and still is currently, a non-verbal child in nappies, limited diet with autism. And I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do if my child is in this same position when it comes to the academic year 2027 start, when he's supposed to start compulsory mainstream education, and he's still in that same position? So I couldn't risk having my child be forced into a mainstream school, or worse yet, forced into me homeschooling, which would have been impossible for me because I work full time. And there's no way I'm able to cease working. So my only option was to make sure that I had secured a specialist placement for his school start 2027. Now, currently he's in a nursery 3 days a week, which is fine because they work nicely with him. He's developing, he's enjoying himself, and that's what he does during the week. It's something that's familiar to him, and that's fine for now, but preparing for 2027. Before I started the process, I had to give myself a bit of time just to research. So I gave myself a couple of days, that's all I needed, just to go through some of the kind of important websites. So you've got the local authority websites, or whatever county you're in. We're based in Essex, so I had to go through the Essex County Council website of how to do the application for the EHCP. I also went to SENDIAS, that's SENDIASS, and then IPSEA websites, just to get an overview of the kind of process, the kind of situation of how an EHCP works, and just get myself mentally ready for what the next, I'm assuming, 8 months was meant to be like. I kind of filled myself with that kind of knowledge before starting the application process. So I had started the application process with things like the GP involvement, the health visitor information. He's gone through, like most autistic kids will go through, is like a hearing test, sight test, his birth to 5 milestones from his nursery, his one plan from nursery, any developmental information that I had from any of the providers. I had also been to a dietitian. I had a sensory report that we had done privately, and then all of the existing professional reports that we had. I compiled all those and listed those in the application form. Now, every county is going to have a different way of doing it, I presume. But this one was quite simple. You get on the website, you download the form, fill it out. It was quite archaic. I would have expected a kind of online form where you could upload things and go through a step-by-step process, but one of those PDF jobs that you had to download and fill out. That was fine. So then you've got next is a 6-week decision. So there's 6 weeks for your county council to decide whether they're going to actually do a needs assessment, education, healthcare needs assessment. And this is a part where you can get rejected or you get accepted. So I waited up until the end of that 6 weeks, and then I got a message, which I really get frustrated at. The messages they do through the secure messaging, where you have to log into a passcode into a system every single time just to get a message. They sent me a message saying that they are refusing to assess, and which was very frustrating for me. So this brought out a lot of rage in me. They were refusing to assess, and the law states for the Child and Families Act that if a child may have potentially SEN needs, then they should be entitled to a needs assessment. Them rejecting me was the first issue. I had gone back and forth for a number of complaints with Essex Council to say, well, it's unfair. I've quoted the law. I've used ChatGPT to compile very calm and professional letters back to them so that they didn't think I was coming across aggressive. At the same time, for me to try and calm down instead of anger typing emails constantly. And they had sent me the kind of next step process. So the next step process really is you've got 2 pathways. Now, obviously, this was my first time doing this. This is my first child. I didn't know that you didn't have to go to mediation, but the way they word it is they want you to go to mediation. Now, at the end of this, all you need is the certificate that comes from the mediation. And you can go to the mediation and get the certificate, or you don't go to the mediation and you still can get the certificate. They say to you that you can get what you want or a change in the circumstances from going to mediation. So I had gone to mediation. I had come fully prepared. I had a script. I had rehearsed it. I'd come prepared. And the lady who was in front of me from the Essex Council, plus the mediator, who was just a guy who's from the mediation company, we were going back and forth through the reasons why I didn't agree with them refusing to assess my son. I said, my son is autistic. He is nonverbal. He is in nappies still. He has a clear sensory issue, and I am fully aware that this child needs EHCP. They've come back and said to me, the one plan that he has in school was appropriate. He's getting the appropriate support that he needs. I said, no, that's not the point. That's not the point why I'm here. The EHCP has a purpose for me, and it is to get him into the school. Whatever else comes with the EHCP is irrelevant for me. Getting him into a specialist placement is the end goal for me. So that's what I need. And they're saying, well, it's too early. I said, well, it's not too early, because if you're going to mess around and take all this time, and I've got to go through tribunals and things, then this could be a 2 to 3 year process. And that's what I've got in my head. That's why I've planned it so early, because I want to get him into the school before September 2027. And I don't have a lot of faith or time to play with. So hence why I'm here. In the end, we've gone through this mediation for 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And she's gone back and said she'll take it back to panel. They've taken it back to panel, and they've refused again. So I think in the meantime, while they've taken it back to panel, I've also gone to raise a tribunal because I disagreed with this. I've also sent them a letter saying that I'm going to tribunal. This is your chance to turn the idea around, because I'm not letting this go. And I've clearly said to them in the complaints that I will not let this go. You may have other parents that will get fed up and stop at this hurdle, which is I know this, which is why they do this, so that you give up and you give in, so they've got less people to have to. Because I know it's a lot. There's a lot of people trying to get support. I said to them, I will not give up. If you say no, I will go through every different medium to get the result that I need to get the support for my child. I've taken it to court and said I need to raise a court case. You need the certificate to take it to court. So I've got all that. I've done the mediation, and I've opened the court case. So the court have given them a deadline to get their paperwork done by, and they give you a deadline. Now, I've been in and out the family courts a fair bit due to my husband's stepchildren and his previous partner, so I know what the family courts are like. So I've been through this. So I've made my whole dossier. I've made my case file. I'm mentally prepared. I'm physically prepared for this court case. Essex Council have asked me to share my paperwork with them, which you have to do legally, I get that. But I said to them, I will share it with you, but at 1 minute before the deadline is due, because I don't want you taking my work and using it as yours. So you'll get it 1 minute before the deadline is due, so then you have no time to use my work. So at this time, obviously this is a lot of tension, anxiety. I've already had a number of emotional breakdowns from being rejected, and we've had a family holiday booked. So we're in Turkey, we've booked a family holiday. And I think we were at the time in a tattoo shop in Marmaris. I can remember it clearly. In a tattoo shop in Marmaris, getting our matching autism tattoos, which was like a love heart with the puzzle piece in it on our left hand. I think my husband was getting his one done when I got my phone call. And the phone call was them saying to me that they were going to actually assess him. And I was ecstatic. I was very happy. But then a bit of attitude came. So it was like, I said to them, can you send me this through an email? Make sure that I've got paperwork to say that you want to assess it. And they said to me, can you close down the tribunal court case? And I said, yes, I will, but I'm not going to close that down until I've got the email, the paperwork, everything that you're going to send me to say that I've got that assessment. And then I think they said to me that you should be happy. I'm like, Now, I would have been happy if you had done it in the time frame that you were meant to do it in and tell me that he has the right to be assessed when you should have done it. You doing it now after 2 rejections because you don't want to go to court or do the paperwork is not me being happy. It's me getting what I should have had in the first place for my child. So there was no need for that. We've got that part done. They're going to assess. So that means now we're part of that 20-week process. With all EHCPs, there should be no longer than 20 weeks. And I made sure I reminded them of that at least weekly. You need to stay within your 20 weeks legal deadline. So that to make sure that I wasn't going over my plan to get my son into that SEN school ready for September 2026. So now we're in the next stage. We've got a new caseworker. I think at this point, was it the second person, I think, maybe, possibly. But obviously different stages can mean different people. So you have to kind of start again, update them, make sure you're giving them consistent communication and telling them everything about your case, your child, and what was going on. And then came my next issue. So famous last words is the educational psychologist. You can't move forward with the EHCP without the educational psychologist report. This is a kind of integral part of the EHCP process. Now, everyone has a queue to these EPs. Maybe I'm in the wrong line of work, but this EP, educational psychologist job, seems to be some hot commodity where no one can get hold of one. So the first mistake that was done was I was told that due to the lack of EPs, the work would take longer than the 20 weeks expected. And well, I said, that's not good enough. I said, well, if I find an EP, will you pay for it? And they said no, and gave me some long speech about this. So I've raised another complaint. And then the lady at the time who I was dealing with, I've said to her, well, what do I do in this situation? I'd like to pay for my own private EP so that I can get this process moved along faster. So she said, you can do that if you want to, but you have to find a certain EP with the certain credentials. And I said, well, just give me an email with whatever those credentials are, and I will find one. Now, I had a friend who I met through Facebook, your local town Facebook page. I was asking some questions. I made a friend who was going through the same process, but she was a little bit ahead of me. And she also wanted her child in the same SEN placement. So we've made a friendship. She was ahead of me. She was giving me kind of tips and tricks of what she came across so far, which also helps me through this journey. As I'm sure, again, as SEN parents, you all know that the 20-week deadline cannot be made longer or shorter due to the fact of them having a shortage of staff, whatever the staff is. That's not a viable excuse. They will be breaking the law. Now, I didn't want to wait and find out and have to fight that. So I've paid for the educational psychologist. I've got the invoice and the receipts, and I've done that part. And they've used the educational psychologist report and said that's acceptable to get me through to the next stage, which I think is where I had another caseworker. So the educational psychologist did better report because it was a private EP. So I went through the whole process of that. They visited Forrest at school. She phone called me and we had a conversation about Forrest's needs and his behaviours and what had happened and what he was going through. And I was just making sure that everything that I knew, I told her as much detail as possible, maybe made sure that I covered everything so that she would put as much detail into the report as possible. I had the EP report come through. It was really good, quite full and juicy. So I was happy to give that to Essex Council. Essex Council used that, and it was after a number of weeks they told me they were going to issue the draft. They were going to issue the draft EHCP, which was great. I mean, that's what I expected. My son's got needs. I expected these are things. This is the thing that I can't get excited about something where I expect the support that I need. So yeah, I mean, I was excited, but this is a basic need that he needs to have met. So we'd had the draft come through. Now, at the time of the draft, I'm trying to get the timings correct. At the time of the draft came through, the panel for the specialist school was afterwards. So this means that I had to agree the draft, get it finalised before they'd even gone to panel. So this is where I got a bit worried. Now, I already knew the specialist placement I wanted. I'd already gone to visit 2 placements, the original placement and a backup placement. At some point, she asked me to name the special placement or the school placement that I wanted, and I named 2 placements, original and the backup. We visited both. I think my husband visited the main one I wanted. I was working, I couldn't get out of work, and then we both visited the backup special school. She asked me to name those schools. I think she gave me a form, asked me to name those schools because I had told them so many times that I needed to have the EHCP finalised. I think that she was worried to fall out of the 20-week timeline because she knew that I was raised a tribunal. But what I had done is when she issued me the final EHCP that didn't list my SEN school placements, which again made sense because we hadn't had the panel yet for it, I had then opened a tribunal in preparation saying that I would like to argue the placement just in case when it because the panel for school placements were a couple of weeks away. I wanted to open that tribunal ready so that I could be prepared to fight in case they said to me, no, you can't have the schools that you want. So I'd done that. So now everyone knew that there's already an open court case. So I think maybe it might have done something. Maybe it changed something. I don't know. But I had that open, I had that ready. And then we went to panel. And panel is where you have a bunch of schools and the councils. I think they sit around and they're trying to deliberate which kid gets into special school and which kid doesn't, basically. So it's like a lottery. So at the first panel, I was so anxious. You know, every single day feels like a month. It was probably. I say this every episode. This was the most stressful. I think everything about being an SEN parent is the most stressful. So this was very stressful. And waited for the day, and then they don't tell you on the day. They make you wait another week or something to say to you, there's been no decision. So I'm like, what does that mean? There's no decision that they haven't decided. It's either yes or no. So they've not decided anything, and I've got to wait until the next, because panel happens like that. In Essex, it's the last Thursday of every month. So it's once a month. So I've got to wait another month, and another month feels like another academic year. So we've had to wait another month. And then, no, I think the panel came up and I didn't have any feedback apart from the backup school said no. And I'd emailed the backup school to say, can you give me a bit more information as to why you've turned down my child for your school? And they told me that they told Essex Council the full details. I said, I've just had a no. So now I've got one school left, which is my original school, which could go either 50-50. So they've told me basically that my son's needs are not as extreme or not as complex as the needs of their students. So it's not a good fit. So I'm like, okay, fine. It makes sense. If you've got really complex needs and my child is just a non-verbal autistic child, then maybe it's not the right placement. That's fine. There's nothing I can do about that. So now I'm just left with my thoughts and my anxiety and the original school that I wanted. And so we're on tenterhooks thinking, is this going to be the placement that we get? Am I going to have to fight it? And I've emailed the school. So I think it was during some sort of school holiday. I've emailed the school because our current nursery is all year round, apart from 1 week. I think they close in the summer. This special school's on some sort of half term. So I've emailed them and saying, I just want to find out, like, did you choose my child? Has my child been chosen? And before they've come back to me, the caseworker that I had from the local authority has called me and told me that my child's been accepted to the original school that we wanted. And I don't know, this was probably the best feeling, like the feeling of having something completed. Now, this 20 minutes that I've explained to you, it has covered the abridged version of about 8 months, 7 to 8 months, maybe probably say 8 months, 8 months in total of work and emotions and stress and opening tribunals, closing tribunals, making dossiers. It's a full-time job on top of my full-time job, by the way. So I've done all this. They've given me the school and ecstatic. So they've told me to close down the tribunal case. And yes, again, I have trust issues with everybody. I'm not closing down anything until I can see my final EHCP in my inbox with the school named and with everything else, and it's final and it's signed and secured, and I've got that. So I said, "Do you give me that? Then I'll close down the court case." Now everyone's willing to help me. Everyone's emailing me saying, "Can we help you close down the court case? Can we help you close down the court case?" And I'm just like, you've got a lot of people trying to help me close down the court case, but no one was helping me trying to get my child into school or giving me the information that I needed to understand why my child is not getting answers. So I said, "I don't need to help me with anything. I'm fully capable of closing down my own court case. I'm the one who opened it, right? So you leave that to me, give me my document, and then I will close down the court case." So I've got my document, everything's secured, and then obviously you got the anxiety thinking, can they change their minds before the school starts? And obviously they can't. It's just anxiety. You've gone through so much, you don't want to lose it or have it taken away from you. So now I've got my child in an SEN placement in a nursery. So before I forget, the SEN placement, the original one, starts at nursery age. So he has the option of going there this academic year, which is in relation to filming this video, it's September 2026. He gets to start because there's a nursery there. So for example, if he had got in any other school, I would have had to wait 2027, which is fine. I had plans for all of this. So he's got in the placement now at the original school, which starts September 2026, which is a couple of months away. But we've also got which is part-time. So the nursery, they do 3 days a week. Now we've also got him in a private mainstream nursery. It's just a small nursery, like baby class, toddler class, preschool class. And he's doing well there. He's enjoying it. They're really good with him. But as a working person, I get 30 hours of free childcare support, and then I pay for an extra day. So he currently does 3 days a week in his private nursery. I pay for an extra day. So let's just say we've got a £300 a month bill. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, great. I've got him in the nursery with the SEN school. That's funded by the EHCP. He's also going to need to do less time in the private nursery because he's got 3 days that are paid for by the EHCP. So now I only need him in his preschool class from September for 2 days, which means I will fall within my 30 hours. So that means I will not have a bill moving forward. So now this is a problem. I don't know many parents of SEN kids, especially parents who want their child in an SEN nursery and also have them in a mainstream nursery, because there's no option for him to be in the nursery 5 days a week in the SEN school. It's nursery 3 days a week, and then when he gets to compulsory age, he goes to 5 days a week. So, which is good for me. I mean, I don't drive, and we live in a small town, so we've got the transport for the SEN nursery because it's a little ways away, and I can walk him to his mainstream nursery twice a week or once a week because my husband's home one day. So everything seems to have fallen into place, but no one seems to know about the fact that, will I get a bill? Will I not get a bill? So the nursery he's currently in, they were convinced that I would get a bill for some reason, that I wouldn't be able to access both fundings. And I'm trying to say, well, why? The 30 hours working parent funding is separate to the EHCP funding. Why would I lose that one because I've been given that? It doesn't make sense to me. So I've had to raise a complaint to Essex Council. I've raised a letter to my local MP, and I've also asked the nursery to investigate it because I'm like, this makes no sense. So, and I didn't want to hire a bill because obviously it's expensive, isn't it? So Essex Council complaint to come back to me and said to me that I was correct. The funding, let's say the funding pots are two separate pots. You've got the 30 hours of childcare, free childcare because you're a working parent, and you've got the EHCP funding for the SEN school. So technically for 2026, 2027 academic year, I don't have a bill, which is perfect. And he's got 5 days a week of academia and education. So he's getting that early intervention. So in essence, I've achieved what I've wanted to achieve. Plus I've achieved his SEN school transport, which is, again, it's another anxiety, but something I'm going to have to get used to, him getting the transport. So I've achieved that. And what I've got now is this blended nursery plan. So he's now having that engagement with I say regular kids, you know what I mean? Kids who are not SEN at his mainstream nursery. And plus he's getting the safety net of his SEN placement as well. So we've got that combination. Now, where I wasn't finished was the fact that I'm still £1,300 out of pocket because I've paid for this private educational psychologist, the EP. So during all of this, and I've managed to get the school placement, I've still had the rejection for a refund from Essex Council for the complaints, which is fine because I needed to go through that complaints process to get the rejection in order to take it to the Ombudsman. I've gone through the whole Essex Council complaints thing. They've told me they're not going to give me a refund. That's fine. I've taken it to the Ombudsman. Now, the Ombudsman is it's like the local social and healthcare ombudsman. There's an ombudsman for everything. And it's basically like if you can't get a resolution to a problem, you take your problem to the ombudsman, and they will help you. They're like a non-judgy mediation between you and, let's say, Essex Council. I said to them, why have I had to pay out of my pocket to get my child into a school when you got all the other non-SEN parents who just get their kids into school for free? So I've had to go through this because you guys have told me well, Essex Council told me that they're not going to be able to meet my needs in time because of the lack of staff or the lack of EPs. So I've given, again, it's like we have to write a full case record. I did that back in November of 2025. And then again, in relation to this video, a couple of days ago, after waiting like maybe 9 months, the Ombudsman says to me that I've won, so they're going to do it in my favour to get Essex Council to pay me back the money for the EP because I shouldn't have paid it in the first place because they didn't say to me they're not going to give me a refund before I told them I was going to pay. And they also didn't say to me that, which they should have done, that it will take the same amount of time to get that EHCP complete, regardless of whether you pay for a private EP or not. I don't agree with that. I think based on some of the people in my nursery, I did my documents myself. I paid for the EP and I've completed what I needed to complete. They're still in a waiting list for an EP, and that was 8 months ago. So it does make a difference, but now the Essex Council have to pay me back, and that's fine because that's my money. I worked hard for it, and that's money that's taken away from my child. So I shouldn't have to pay to get my child into education, and Essex Council now need to give me that money back, and that's fine. It's all kind of worked out well. Where are we now? So we've got the EHCP secured. We've got the preferred specialist placement secured. We've got him also in his mainstream nursery, continuing part-time to get that blended lifestyle, you know? And for me, the mentality is that I needed him to secure that specialist placement because it is easy for me to take him out of a specialist placement and place him into mainstream when the time comes. It is not as easy for me to let him go through mainstream struggling to try and get him into an SEN placement. So that is my logic. And that was always how it was going to be. That was always my plan. And I think a lot of times people say to me, why have you done things so early? Why have you preempted situations so early? This is exactly why, because I don't want to get to a point where I'm getting calls from a mainstream nursery saying that we don't change nappies. You need to come in and change your child's nappy, or your child can't come to our school. I can't be in that situation. So we've also got the refunds coming for the private EP secured, and then we've also got my child's placement secured for September in the next few months. A year ahead of the actual plan I had to have him started in 2027, which is when he's meant to start primary school. So I've got an extra year of him having that support with all the other items that I listed in his section F, which is where all the kind of like support things are going to get listed. So all the speech and language, all the supporting him with like words and speaking and communication, all the different things that the EP has written down. He's going to get all those things as well. And I think maybe in another episode, we'll go through all the different sections and help you break it down. But for now, I just wanted to share with you what I went through and how my mind kind of worked out this situation and what we were going to do. What I would do differently as well is I would have made sure I learnt the legal test before making the initial application and make sure I understood fully what the potential for the failure to assess would have been, because I think I was so expecting them to not fail me in the beginning that it made me a lot more stressed and more angry when I did get that failure. So just mentally being prepared to go in for a few more cases and maybe putting a few more feelers out there just to get an understanding of what could happen, because I would have saved myself a lot of anxiety and stress and anger if I had maybe done a bit more research. I know that the diagnosis isn't necessary, but my plan was diagnosis, EHCP, SEN school, and I had a plan and I was sticking to it. You don't need a diagnosis if you're still in a waiting list for diagnosis. The psychologists and the reports and the people will give you all the evidence to secure your EHCP or go through the process anyway. So you don't need the diagnosis, but I wanted it. I was in a timeline and I wanted to stick to it. And then also, not so much what I would do differently, but just making sure that you document everything, keep every email, make a folder with every single interaction you have, because there's going to be a point where you need to refer back to it. And I still to this day have to go back to my emails to make sure that they haven't said anything to me that maybe will stop the Ombudsman from giving me my refund, will stop me from getting the EHCP. So documenting everything and just making sure that I'm careful with how I communicate. Hence why I use a lot of ChatGPT to draft my emails, and I will just brain dump out loud and get them to write the emails, and then I will put the email responses that the council give me into GPT to formulate responses as well, so that it's professional, the tone is right, and it's not just me angry typing abuse at the council. At the end of the day, this whole thing, it's not about, well, again, I guess it is about beating Essex, isn't it? It's about beating them because my child is more important than whatever it is they're trying to do. You know, whatever their plan is, my child comes first, and it's all about making sure my child has access to education, and an education, not just an education that meets his needs, an education that is built around him and his learning style, him and his development delays, and an environment that for me is safe for him. I don't want him being bullied, singled out because he's in nappies, because he doesn't talk. I don't need any of that drama. So in order for me to avoid SEND drama, I made sure that I secured the things that I needed. And if you go in there with your goals, my goal was to get his SEN placement, to make sure I had that EHCP finalised, and to do whatever it took to make sure I had those outcomes. You will get what you need if your child needs it. Obviously, I'm not saying that if your child's got a bit of dyslexia, you probably are not going to get the EHCP because there's support in mainstream schools. But if you've got a child with severe needs or moderate needs, you have a right to an education. And that's all we want for our children. I just want all other SEND parents to learn your rights, stick by your guns, and whatever no's or refusals you get, doesn't matter, because you will just keep fighting until you overturn those refusals. So take care of yourself, and until the next episode, thank you for listening. Have a good rest of your day.